The subway is your friend. Definitely get the Metro card, especially when you start working. There's usually like a program called like WageWorks or something like that, where they'll take pre-tax income and put that towards your Metro card. It's cheaper if you do it that way than if you just do it like out of pocket after you get paid. Use the subway as much as possible because it's significantly cheaper. Definitely try to limit how many like Ubers and Lyfts you take, because that can add up really quickly. Cost savings, particularly make your own food or eat in when you can, just because if you get lunch like every day you're at the office, that adds up quickly. I guess definitely be selective. I know you're going to want to go out as much as possible. You know, you're 22, you're 23. You know, you're working really hard and you want to go and kind of have fun with your friends, but make sure you don't do it in a way that you put yourself in a bad spot financially. I think that's definitely a big thing. When regards to looking at apartments, I would say live in the neighborhood like that you really want to live in, that you think is going to be the best fit for you, regardless of where your office is. Just because, for example, my first apartment, I lived on the Lower East Side and I could walk to work, which was great. But I only ended up being in that job for 6 more months after that apartment. And then I ended up having to, my new office was up in Midtown. So then I had a little bit more of a commute. So even though like I picked that apartment because of the proximity to work, things change, your job might change radically. And then you were stuck living in a place where you only did it because it was convenient for your job, and then your job is different. So that's just my take on like neighborhoods personally. I mean, it's great, obviously, if you can work to work, but don't like put that whole thing on your apartment decision.
It's not as daunting as it seems. It certainly can be, but I think if you take the right measured approach, you can experience a lot that the city has to offer. I'm biased being from the area, but I think it's the greatest city in the world. And try to lean into those experiences, be it, you know, going to museums, going to see some shows. You know, there's tons of great comedy sellers to go to. You can see, you know, your favorite comedian on a random Wednesday night. So while it may seem daunting, don't be afraid to experience new things in the city. But like I said, with a measured approach, you know, you don't want to burn yourselves out too much. So, you know, find that right balance of exposing yourself to new experiences while not overextending yourself.
One of my favorite things to do in New York is walk. Walking is the best part about New York, and exploring, being able to just like walk out of your door and look at and see something completely new and look at, experience different things. So I would definitely recommend walking as much as possible, and even getting a city bike membership. A city bike is like a rental bike. They're all over New York City. You can easily get them, and a monthly membership will allow you to like go and explore new neighborhoods. But I would say just having that sense of adventure and definitely getting out there and exploring as much as possible.
I think navigating the city, a lot of it is just, it comes back to networking. I think like really when you're looking for an apartment, when you're looking for a job, if you're just trying to find a place to go out or a place to check out, I mean, clearly you can go to Google and look at, you know, what are the best places to go to. But I have found that just recommendations from people, really finding out like what are some cool spots that, you know, aren't mainstream, that people aren't aware of, not the touristy spots that everybody comes in and goes to in and around Times Square. I find that's the best way to navigate the city. And sometimes I just want to leave my apartment and just walk around and explore. I think that's been probably one of the most beneficial things for me. It's fun. I find new places, and you know, it's all about that exploration of this cool city.
So getting as comfortable with the subway system as possible, I would say, is a must in the early stages of your time in New York City. The subway is not the most glamorous form of transportation, but I promise you that it's the most efficient form of transportation, even when it can give you a hard time. On the surface, it can take a lot of time for cars and trucks and buses to get around. The subway, I think, is everyone's lifeline. And I know people who are starting their jobs that take the subway to and from work, and I know people who are pretty senior in their jobs and they've been living and working in New York for 20 years who still take the subway to work. I would say that's a very important piece of navigating the city. Otherwise, when the weather's nice, I would encourage anyone to just walk around and get to know the streets and get to know the surroundings and be comfortable with how neighborhoods are connected and the best way to get from one place to another. And in doing so, you can also become more comfortable with New York and, you know, having it feel like you're home too.
I think the energy here, like you're not going to find anything else like it. And there's always like a new restaurant, a new neighborhood. And there's just, you never know like when you might have like a really great night out and you're like, I never would have been able to have a night like that if I lived anywhere else. And there's always like a really beautiful element of surprise here. You never know that, you know, one night out, or, you know, I did an intramural volleyball team, you know, years ago, and I ended up meeting one of my best friends, like because we were on the same team. And I never would have thought like, oh, hey, you're going to join this intramural volleyball team and you're going to meet like one of your best friends moving forward. I never would have thought that would have been possible. So there's just an energy. You're going to meet really smart, interesting, ambitious people who are from all over the country, because, you know, New York pulls from all over the place. You know, you're going to meet really interesting people depending on your job, or just, you know, depending on where you go out. Definitely throw yourself into different activities, you know, based on your interests, whether it's like a kickball league or soccer. There's always something to do here. And there are a lot of free activities too. Even just exploring Central Park, or, you know, I had a friend and I where we would pick one neighborhood and explore it and like just find new restaurants and things like that. And that's always kind of how I've discovered the best places, is you just walk by this little like Italian place, you're like, oh, that looks good. And then you go in and you're like, oh, wow, this is amazing. So there's just so much to do, and there's really kind of a wonderful element of kind of anything's possible. You never know where you might meet a new friend or discover something you really love as an activity, or maybe a new neighborhood that maybe that's where you want to live next.
I think it's the friends and the network that I've made. You know, New York and living in the city isn't for everybody, but for those that are, you're going to find these are like-minded individuals that you can really develop strong bonds and relationships with. And I think once you find, you know, once you're in the working world, you're out of school, you've graduated, sometimes it's tough to establish those types of networks. You know, you'll have your work friends, but you don't want to lose that sense of camaraderie that you may have had from, you know, St. Joe's, from being in school, being a part of a sports team, a club, etc. But what I found is if you find some individuals who also want to live in the city, they can be very like-minded to yourself, career-driven, common interests outside of work. Maybe you both love theater and you like to go to shows together. You know, you find common interest in the professional world. So the network that I've been able to establish with great friends, and, you know, they're not just colleagues. These are friends that I've made that I hope that I have in my life for many, many years. So that has been a really great benefit, is to meet other like-minded, professionally driven individuals.
Being able to walk out of your door and experience something new every day and explore all the time. There's always something going on. There's always something to do if you're bored, or something like that. But definitely just the energy and the ability to like walk out your door and not know what's gonna happen.
I think honestly, the exploration of the city, like there's always stuff going on. There's like whether you want to go out to a bar, a restaurant, a show, live music, just walk around and experience the vibes. Museums, there's Central Park, there's just so many different things that you can do at any time. If you're a morning person, if you're a night person, there's something for everyone. It's always lively. There's always stuff going on, and I feed off of that energy, and that's why I think, you know, as a kid coming from a small town where I grew up, I live and feed off the vibe of the city.
So my favorite part of living in New York has kind of changed as I've changed, quite honestly. When I moved to the city, I was a single guy. I lived with 2 single guy roommates, and you know, we were out all the time, meeting people, making friends, going to different bars and restaurants. I eventually became a taken man, and you know, I'm now living in New York with my fiance, and that's a different experience. And you know, she and I, we love to get out and explore the city, try new neighborhoods, try new restaurants, new food. I'd say my favorite part nowadays of living in New York is bar hopping and having a good beer, or pizza hopping and having a good slice or 2 or 3 or 4, just trying new foods, trying new restaurants. The city just has so many great places to try.
So that's very different. So my current job, initially things have kind of changed. Initially we went all remote. They got rid of our office. My apartment with roommates. I was lucky that I had enough space to be able to really like fit in a desk. If you talked to me in my first apartment in the city, like I would have had to move home to my parents. There would have been no way I could have fit the desk and like worked from there, or I would have needed a new apartment. So that was an adjustment. Right, kind of, I guess, like after COVID, I ended up getting my own 1-bedroom. So I lucked out that there is space here, you know, for like a working station. But now my office is on a hybrid schedule. I'm very lucky that it's a 20-minute walk. I'm one of the few companies that's not like mandated for it. I know some companies, you know, it's 3 days a week or at least 2 days a week. I think a lot of it depends on kind of what sector you work in. A lot of my friends who are in finance or law, you know, they've been doing 2 or 3 days a week for a very long time. I work in tech, so they're pretty flexible. I usually do like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office, and then Monday and Friday from home. So it's nice, you know, to remember what it's like to kind of go out, you know, get dressed, leave your house, and kind of socialize and just be in like a different environment. And I really like having the boundary of like, this is where I go to work. This is where I go home and relax. But it's also nice, you know, one day if you want a little bit more sleep, you can work from home. It's not a big deal. My job is pretty flexible as long as you get your work done. You could do that from New York. You could be in Hawaii for all anybody knows. As long as you do that, they're really supportive. I will say now that, you know, things are getting back to normal. Our executive leadership is definitely expecting people to be in the office a little bit more. And they do incentivize that by like free lunches. You know, they might order sushi one day or dig or whatever it may be. So we're definitely moving towards that. I don't think we'll ever be in the office 5 days a week again. But that's how it is, you know, for me. For example, I have a cousin who works Facebook and she's in Monday through Thursday. Also, though, Facebook does incentivize you, like you can get 3 meals a day there. So I think that definitely helps. But it's nice to have the flexibility. I don't think I would do well if I was fully remote, particularly as you switch jobs. Like so much of learning, particularly in the thing, is being able to collaborate with people and talk things out and, you know, turn to your desk chair and ask someone a question. I think a lot of times if things are done all on a video call or all through a Slack conversation, I think sometimes things can get lost in translation and it's not the best use of your time, you know, as an employee. So, you know, especially in those younger years, I can't imagine like not going to the office and not learning and seeing other people in different roles and kind of figuring out, oh, I really like that, or I like that person and how they do their job. I want to learn more about that. If you were fully remote, you wouldn't be getting any of that visibility or exposure. I also think too, as a new grad and going into it, I think certain sectors you might have to realize certain things you're going to have to be in for. Kind of similar. I have a lot of friends in New York who are in finance or law, so they're in, pretty regularly. Tech, I'd say a lot of people are like 3 days a week. So that's just something to take into account, as you start applying to jobs. But I think anything with an in-person component, particularly in New York too, you don't live in New York to stay inside your apartment all the time, particularly because they're small.
So yes, COVID definitely threw the work-life balance, really turned it on its head, like nothing I'd ever experienced before. So in March of 2020, my company shut our offices down completely and switched to a complete remote schedule. And there were some growing pains, little things of just getting out of the daily routine of getting up, working out, getting some coffee, heading into the office. All of that was gone. And so one of the challenges was reestablishing a new routine, to find what worked for me, to adjust to this new normal, and still to be able to get my job done. Fast forward to now, we are going with a hybrid model. As you can see, I'm in my apartment today. So they do offer us that flexibility, which is great. So I think a lot of companies are taking it on a case-by-case basis. And I would encourage those who have the opportunity to go in the office to do so. It's tough to recreate the office atmosphere from one's apartment. Even if you do have roommates, you just develop so much tribal knowledge, and you might hear colleagues on the phone. You'll get to network more. You may see a boss of another team that you may want to join someday. So, though it's like we had to unlearn that in-office behavior with COVID, now that we're further along and, kind of returning to normalcy, start to relearn those old behaviors and be able to adapt in this hybrid working world, because I think both have a lot of benefits. Seek to take advantage of both of them.
Like I said earlier, New York City apartments are small. COVID was not great. Me and my husband were both working together full-time in a 500 square foot apartment. So it was definitely challenging, but you kind of learn to deal with the situation that you're given. And there were a lot of great things that happened during COVID as well. And I think it kind of gives you the opportunity to have some perspective. Currently, I work I'm hybrid, so I go into the office about once a week. One thing I would recommend when looking for a new job or looking for a job in New York is while hybrid is great and flexibility is something that all companies, in my opinion, should give their employees, don't be afraid if the job requires you to go into the office, because that is a great way to meet people, to build your network, and to make some great friends. Some of my best friends I've met through work, and that office environment will really help you when you're moving into a new city to establish a network and a routine.
Our work setup is hybrid. So we are expected to come into the office 3 days a week. It's not, I would say, strictly enforced right now, but we typically, everyone tries to do 3 in the office, 2 at home. For me, I actually like going into the office. Similarly, on how I feed off the vibe of the city, I like seeing my coworkers. I like seeing people. I like that in-person interaction. And so I actually try to go in 4 or 5 days a week, but it is optional. And then our company has also implemented remote policies. So we do have workers that strictly work from home and may only come into the office if we're doing a larger team-wide event and we're just trying to get everyone together. But it's nice to have the flexibility as to when you go in and how often.
So in my first few years of living in New York, I was first doing the reverse commute out of New York City to work in an office in Connecticut. I was then working in New York City in Midtown, and then through the COVID pandemic, or the first year of the pandemic, I was working completely remotely. And then in April of 2021, I took a position with a company that is entirely remote, actually. In a lot of ways, it feels like the experience that I had during the COVID pandemic has just kind of continued. It doesn't feel like I am working for a company that's totally remote. It just kind of feels like my world is still remote. I don't anticipate that it will be that way forever. I am someone who admittedly likes being in an office, at least every now and then. I do really like the flexibility that being remote provides, and being able to work from my home a lot of the time. But I enjoy a healthy office culture. I enjoy human to human interaction. It's something that I will get back to. So I would say the long and short of it is that no job is perfect. I think the ability to work remote is important, but I also think that the camaraderie and the culture that good and healthy office spaces have is also really nice and can be important. So like any good thing in life, personally, I think it's finding that middle ground.